Hello, welcome back to Map Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. 30 years of anime. 30 years! It's like, what? Anime is a big part of my life, and not only have I, had it in my personal life, but I've brought it into my professional life. I've had different conversations with coworkers, sure, but I've had a lot of conversations with students about it, and that's been fun. Anime is such a cool thing. Animation in general is, it's like you know, art and math and motion, and it can be a beautiful thing. And some of the characters and stories and action pieces are just amazing. And there's so much that anime has particularly influenced, right? Like it has all those things, and then has that extra layer of cultural elements to it, and that can mean a variety of different things. But it's just interesting to see how anime impacts other things, and other things impact anime, and just seeing how things change over time. And that's pretty cool. So I want to probably start by talking about my experiences growing up with anime and kind of seeing how it shifted over time, and talking about some different animes that I've watched over time. And it's just kind of crazy, right? Because in addition to the anime themselves, it's like there's a lot of gaming that has been impacted by anime, and of course, being into anime, like I feel like it's only a matter of time before you get into manga, right? And I think that's all cool too. Um, and so I want to talk about that. And I've talked about anime on my channel before. Definitely a lot of Dragon Ball videos. And since Pokemon is all over the place, I've talked about that. Because, it's an anime, it's a game, it's just a lot of things. And I've talked about Toonami at length, and that was a really fun video for me, which, I'll share in the description. But yeah, so I want to talk about just a lot of things, and there's going to be anime that I'm thinking of that I'm going to forget, and you know what, that's okay, I can live with it. In any case, so let me start in the beginning. So I started watching anime when I was about 6, somewhere in that ballpark, and I'm about 36 now. um, so when I started, for context, I didn't even know I was watching anime. I didn't hear the term anime until I was around 13. So at that point, I've been watching anime for 7 years and didn't know that I really liked it because I didn't know what it was. But as soon as I found out what it was, I'm like, oh God, I've been into this for a long time. So when I started, I don't remember the first anime that I saw, but I remember that it's one of three. Um, it's either Speed Racer, Transformers, or Voltron. I remember watching them all when I was around 6. I just can't remember which one came first, but they were all anime, and I just didn't know that. Back then I just thought they were cartoons. It didn't have that cultural aspect to it, or like, you know what I mean. Like I didn't get that, right? I didn't get that. Hey, these are things that are coming from Japan, and that might not have been an accident for those shows. I'm not sure, but that was definitely intentional later on for a lot of the shows that hit our way. And that's it's crazy to think about, right? Because there was like a weird period in time where there was a lot of censorship. Um, and it wasn't just censoring violence like in Dragon Ball, although Dragon Ball is like an inherently violent show, among other things. So it's such like censoring that is a ridiculous notion. It was still pretty violent. So it's like, I don't know, it was weird. But that wasn't the only thing, right? And they didn't just censor things like, drugs and stuff like that. They censored like explicitly Japanese things. One of the most famous examples is with Pokemon, and Brock and the jelly donuts thing. It's like they were not jelly donuts. Um, so it was like it's crazy, right? Because it's just like it was rice cakes, right? But they didn't show that, and they also changed a lot of names back then. But that has changed for the better over time, and I'll get to that too. But starting or going back to the beginning, so early on, right? I watched one of those three first. Speed Racer, Voltron, and Transformers. And it wasn't long after that I watched Ronin Warriors, also known as Samurai Troopers. I had very distinct memories of that, like growing up, because I remember I watched that when I was 7 and when I was 8, I used to watch that. It was just like the coolest thing, because it's just hey, there's people running around. Then they would transform and they would have their armor, and it was cool. Um, and I would go on to get like a DVD of Ronin Wars, which included two movies from them when I was in college. It was cool stuff, and so then over time, they brought more anime our way. And again, like they didn't really call it that, but there was a period where everyone was into it, and then that kind of went away as we got older. But that has shifted, and we'll get to that too. But there was a period where a lot of things were getting popular, right? Like back when I was 10, and I just made a video on this, like on Dragon Ball, like because that's been 25 years of Dragon Ball for me. Um, so back when I watched Dragon Ball, like I can't remember the specifics of when that premiered, but it's like I it just that blew me away, and it's been a crucial part of my life ever since. Like it's shown up in videos on this channel. It's shown up in my personal life, my professional life, and so around that time, right? Like you had Dragon Ball Z, you had Sailor Moon, Card Captors, and then Pokemon followed pretty shortly after, right? And Pokemon was just such an interesting thing because like I started with the games and like I don't even know how I got into the games, but I asked my parents about that and they were like, "You asked for this." And I'm like, "What?" I don't remember asking for Pokemon, but I did apparently, and I was playing the games and got into the anime. And then so anyway, around that time, Digimon also came out, and I gave that a chance. I was able to watch that from the beginning. And the funny part is, I had the Digimon virtual pets before I ever saw the anime, which is interesting. So, in any case, so I was younger and I was, taking a dive into anime more, like through that appearing more on TV, and then things got upped. Toonami happened. And I know some people will talk about, the type of anime that appears on Toonami for whatever reason, but a lot of people, like myself, have fond memories of it. And it was a good entry point into a wider world of anime. And so, yeah, you saw things like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon on there. And with Dragon Ball Z, they were able to do more and bring more episodes in. And that was great. But you also saw a variety of other shows. And I can't even mention just all the Toonami shows that I have seen because there's been a lot. And I did talk about that not long ago. Probably should have refreshed myself on that. But, um, you know, there was things like Rurouni Kenshin, things like Gundam, like Outlaw Star, The Big O. There was a lot of shows that came out around that time that got bigger and drew a lot of people in. There was also Tenchi Muyo, but I was never really a big fan of that. But some people like that, and so I was like, hey, I mean, if it pulls you in, why not, right? It just wasn't my cup of tea, but that's how anime works, right? There's a lot of variety in it, and so I think a lot of people can find something that they enjoy, and I think that's cool. So I watched a lot on Tanami, and I think my I talked about my Dragon Ball journey pretty recently, and that was interesting because like I started with Dragon Ball Z, right? And then while I was watching Dragon Ball Z, they brought Dragon Ball, which I didn't even know existed at that time. It was like holy crap! And then I found out that we got the order wrong. Like they started us with Dragon Ball Z, a lot of us out there, and then we got Dragon Ball, and then eventually GT, and way down the line Super, which I watched and enjoyed, and I've seen both of the movies for it. And a lot of Dragon Ball Z movies. So it's like in some of the Dragon Ball movies. In any case, that is my favorite anime. Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, all that sort of stuff. It's like it basically if it has Dragon Ball, even though I'm not a big fan of GT, it's crushed together in all the Dragon Ball stuff. So it's just like, um, but that shaped me, and it was interesting to see that reach a broader audience because it's just like a lot of people at that time, whether they were hardcore anime fans or not, they like Dragon Ball Z, and also like Pokemon stuff like that. And so it was cool to grow up on that and also get more into these stories. And like, I was kind of the right age for some of these things. Like, so for Digimon and Pokemon, they hit me at just the right age. They came out at just the right time. And with Digimon, I was blown away by it because, like, I was a kid. and it didn't really talk down to kids, you know. It's like the kid they were sorry, the characters in the show were kids too, but they were dealing with like the craziest stuff, right? And by the end it was just like kind of crazy for that first like season series, whatever you want to call it, because it's just like there's a lot of darkness and nihilism towards the end. It's like holy crap. um so but you know, stuff that sticks with you. And I kept on watching Digimon for a while, then I fell out, but I would come back to it several times in my life. And anyway, sorry, in any case, there was a lot of stuff that I watched mostly through Toonami, in the middle school era and the high school era. And they had like a really solid run. They brought a lot of different things. And when I was in high school, I also started watching Adult Swim, and they had anime on there too. Like you know, they had like Foolie Cooley, they had Cowboy Bebop, um, sorry, Trigun, stuff like that, and that was cool. And then later, Toonami went away for a while, and Adult Swim kind of picked up the torch, so to speak, on the weekends. In which case, you know, there's a really solid run around like 2005, 2006, 2007, somewhere in that ballpark, where it was like Inuyasha, Full Metal Alchemist, Scried, which is one of my favorite anime. I feel like it's underrated. You had stuff like that though for a while. There's probably other ones that I'm missing, but it was a really solid run. Um, and so after high school, or sorry, like let me back up a bit. So in high school, you know, I was watching Toonami, I was watching Adult Swim, but I really was digging me some anime, and I would have friends that would tell me about anime that I didn't know about, because you know at the time I had not heard of Akira. And so I found out about that. I found out about Ghost in the Shell, Ninja Scroll, stuff like that. And here's the thing, that stuff wasn't on Toonami. It wasn't on Adult Swim, at least as far as I can remember. Um, and so here's the thing, Netflix, when it started, if you didn't know, some of you are my age or older, so you know, or some of you are younger and you might know. But if you didn't know, Netflix started out mailing DVDs. You would rent out the DVDs, like you would watch them for a certain amount of days, and then you have to send them back, right? So back then, much to my surprise, they had a lot of different like anime. In addition to like movies, they had, you know, they had series, and some of these series were anime. So I got to see things like um, sorry, I got to see like Trigun and Cowboy Bebop in full, because I hadn't seen every episode of those, watching them on the network. But I also got to see things like Ninja Scroll, and I also got to see Berserk, and I got to see movies like Akira, and the other one I mentioned, Ghost in the Shell. I would later watch Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, but that's a whole nother thing. That was a show, and I watched that, I think, Adult Swim. But anyway, so high school was a chance for me to dive deeper into anime, and you know, explored just outside of what I had seen in TV, and that was good. And then when I was in college, we had an anime club, so I got exposed to a lot of different anime there, and I got to expose some people to some anime that they might not have seen. Because you know, even though I got to see like Ronin Warriors or Samurai Troopers, whatever you prefer, some people hadn't, right? And so I got to show that to some people, and they were intrigued. And some other anime too. And I also got exposed to some things early on that would eventually become a bit more mainstream. Like I saw Samurai 7 before they got popular. And so around that time where, you know, this is going on, there was that cool era of Adult Swim that I was talking about. So I got more exposure through Anime Club, renting out Netflix DVDs. And this was like from high school into college. And then there was that Adult Swim stuff that came out. So like I said, Inuyasha, Scried, stuff like that. Full Metal Alchemist, the first one, later on, Brotherhood. Um, and that was really cool. And so I got into Samurai 7. But speaking of Samurai, Samurai Champloo, that was my show. That show is so awesome. It's got so much just amazing choreography. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed how it was paced. And again, it was awesome. I dig it. I can't recommend it enough. And also, speaking of Samurai, while we're talking about Samurai 7 and we're talking about Samurai Champloo, later on in college, there was Afro Samurai. And that too was great. And at the time, I had an afro myself. And so that was cool. I was like, yeah. We both got froze. So, and anyway, That was a cool era because I got to expand in multiple different ways. Because, like I said, there was the Netflix stuff. There was a Toonami, and then when that died, like Adult Swim, and I had already been watching some anime on Adult Swim anyway. And then there was Anime Club at my college, and so I got a lot of exposure over that time. And there were so many animes, some of which I do not remember at all. Um, and then there was a period like after college where I got to explore. I wanted to try some different anime, and there was a lot of anime that was watched during that time. But two of my favorite from that era are Code Geass, which if you had not seen it, do yourself a favor, watch that show, watch that anime. And then also Steins Gate, which is based on a light novel of all things. And it's like, so that's pretty cool. And so, like I said, there was a lot that I got to explore, some of which I absolutely don't remember, but some of it was really good. I remember though that I got to during that time like Code Geass and Steins Gate were my favorites, but I also remember watching Chrome Shell around that time, which I really liked the action in that. Um, and I cannot remember the name of the show, but there was a show. It was about a villain, and it was a spinoff from another show. And the villain was a psychic, and it was funny, and it was very self-aware. And also, there was a point before that era where I was just like looking into different anime that were out there. There was an era where I was with my parents towards the end of college, and they had gotten like the Funimation channel, and so I watched a lot of anime on there, most of which I have forgotten. But one I didn't forget was Kenichi, the Mightiest Disciple. That show was funny. The action was good and it was funny. It was self-aware. It was great. Um, so anyway, back to that experimentation era. I mean, Code Geass just it was something that I had actually been exposed to before because I had seen a few episodes on Adult Swim, but it wasn't hitting at that time. And so when I was like looking into some like anime that might be worthwhile, I kept on coming across that. I'm like, well, maybe I should give it another chance, right? And I did, and it was awesome. Seriously, watch that show. And Science Gate, I just like time travel is really fun to me, so I enjoyed that. And there was other ones that I tried at that time, some of which I liked, some of which I didn't, some of which again I don't remember. They could have been good, they could have been bad, but weren't memorable enough. I mean, like I remember that I did get to try Speed Grapher, and that was different. This was also an era where like I watched Casher and Sins. That was also different, but I didn't like that as much as Speed Grapher. Um, there's a lot. And so over time, I got increasingly busy, and I have not been able to watch as much anime as I like. But the most recent thing is just like Super because I watched that whole series. And I watched the movies. The last one was in 2022, and I've also finally got around to watching Digimon Try, which I dig. Right, it's good. It's just super dark. Yeah. Um, but outside of that, it has slowed down a little bit for me anime wise, but like I have a lot on my list, so I want to like find more time to like watch that more because it's been such a big part of my life and I enjoy it. But outside of watching anime, there's been, anime games like a lot of Dragon Ball games, but also a lot of games that either have like anime cutscenes or like are very inspired by anime, and I think that's cool. It's good to see that. Like you might have something like something like the Tales of series where that's clearly like inspired, or you might have something that I came across completely and totally randomly, like Tokyo Xanadu. Like, cause there's a game like Tokyo Xanadu like Plus, and I know that there is an anime, and like the game itself features anime segments, and it has that aesthetic, and that is fun. It was just like I came across it, and it was just like okay, I wanted to give it a chance, and I like it. I like the gameplay. I play it from time to time, and it's still good. But that being said, yeah, there's plenty of like games that are just like straight up anime games or like that I've played or like is clearly heavily inspired. And one that doesn't get talked about much is like so Devil May Cry. That series is very inspired by anime. And for the record, there's a Devil May Cry anime. And for the record, that that's okay, right? I really like the opening. The actual anime for Devil May Cry is okay. It's not bad. Well, it's not mind blowing. I think you can watch it and have a reasonably good time and not regret your experience. There's also supposed to be a Devil May Cry that's still in the works. Another anime coming. Um, Kind of like in the vein of what they did for the Castlevania anime, from what I hear, because I still need to see that. Um, but everything that I've seen, like clip wise, looks amazing. I just have to find the time. But anyway, with Devil May Cry 3 in particular, that was the most like anime Devil May Cry game I've ever played in the best way possible. And anime overall, there's so much variety in it, right? There's a lot of tropes and themes, sure, but there's, you can have an anime about anything, right? You can have an anime about fighting. It could be something like actual fighting, like something like boxing or just about any martial arts, but it could also be something like that's more otherworldly, like Dragon Ball. But you could also have about catching a different creature like Pokemon or Digimon. You could have anime that's based off of games. You could have games that are based off of anime. Um, you could have anime about cooking. You could have anime about school. You can have anime about the paranormal, which hearing the para part reminds me, Paranoia Agent was a thing at a time, and I watched it, and it was very interesting and also disturbing on some level or another. Also, speaking of that, that also reminds me of like the different like blood series, like Blood Plus, Blood C, Blood, all that, and they were interesting in their own right. There was a time where I watched that stuff. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so there's a lot of different types of anime that you can do. I do gravitate towards the more action-oriented anime, but I do like me some comedy as well. Like Oren High, that was a pretty funny anime. Um, and so I think like stuff like that there's definitely like place for and there's just so much out there that's really cool. And also I would be remiss if I didn't mention that thanks to my time in college I also got exposed to a lot of like Studio Ghibli films, a lot of like Miyazaki stuff too in that process, right? um and it's hard to separate those two from one another anyway. And also, like much later down the line, there was a graphics engine that like Studio Ghibli put out. If I can remember that when I post this, I'll put that in the description. In any case, like there's so much cool stuff that has come out from anime, and I've seen some really cool, ridiculous, and over the top stuff from anime, and it's been great. And also just circling back because that's just where my mind is. I meant to mention there was a point where I did watch Naruto, um, and or Naruto, however you want to say it. But with Naruto, like I didn't really watch it regularly, but then there was like a marathon where they were doing like it was like over 100 episodes, so I ended up watching that when a lot of that when they did that because I was thinking about like some of the bigger ones that I watched that like a lot of people will probably know about and can relate to and share what they think about that. So Dragon Ball, sure, Naruto, sure, also Bleach, and I'd like to say Bleach hurt me. So back when I watched Bleach the first time, like I got really into it in like one summer. That was just like all I was watching. I needed to catch up as far as I was concerned. And so, I got to the end of the Aizen thing and that just rubbed me the wrong way. And for a while, I just didn't mess with it. I did follow up and keep track of the story. And now they have brought the anime back and I need to watch that at some point because I am curious. But for a while, it hurt me. I was not satisfied with how that arc ended. Um, but anyway, there was a lot of other anime that I have definitely like missed along the way because I've been trying to remember all the different ones I've seen. But there were some good ones, there were some bad ones, there were some okay ones, there were some that were just like fundamentally bonkers in the best way, and there's some that have just been like with me lifelong, like Dragon Ball. And so and I do like some of the more subdued stuff sometimes, but I really like the ridiculous, over the top things. It's what I like about some anime. It's what I like about some comics too. Um, and so yeah, it's like anime led me into manga, and there's a lot of back and forth between anime and gaming, and I like it. And one of the cool things I wanted to talk about is that bring this video to a close is that when I was younger, um, I feel like there was before I was even born, they brought anime over here, and it was kind of quietish. But then there was a more concentrated effort to bring, you know, anime more to us in the 90s, and so we had that anime boom. But there was a lot of censorship, and not just because of violence and stuff like that. There was censorship to erase Japanese culture, and it was weird. There was a lot of changes in different dubs, because like my thing is like, right, I will watch an anime dubbed or I will watch a subbed. But back then the dubs were not so good. They've gotten a lot better in terms of not only the vocal performances and what their like voice actors are allowed to do, but there's also more adherence to the source material, which can be very useful. And so I've seen that change. But one of the other big things is like, so there was a big anime like Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon, which a lot of people didn't even know were anime back then, that drew people in, but didn't make them necessarily lifelong anime fans. But and there was a lot of other reasons behind that, right? Like a lot of people thought like anime was lame, or it was this and it was that, or it was for kids, and those people were wrong, just across the board. But what I noticed over time is, since anime has become more normalized, there's a lot of people that grew up on it like I did, and like people of my era did. But they're more comfortable with that, and they're more widespread. Because there's some people who I knew who still liked it, but just didn't talk about it. But now, that is not always the case. Like I've had the whole conversations with students about anime over the years, and one of the things that I would used to do is I would make problems and I would mix up the name. So because you might hear like really boring names. So sometimes I would choose different names, like that people might not expect, just like names in real life. But then I might also do like anime names of video game characters, and that would spark some discussion among students, and we have some good conversations. Like I remember there was one student who who was reading a Venn diagram, and they recognized some of the names, and they were like, Lelouch? You're a Code Geass fan? I'm like, yeah, you know it. So, and anyway, it's cooler to see anime more accepted over here in the States. It's just cooler to see people more, sorry, comfortable with that. Now, one of the things that I saw, that I have seen, is there are a few people out there where they hate the fact that it's a little bit more acceptable. And they're like, whoa, when I was a kid, I was ostracized for this. And while I get it, because a lot of us were made fun of for a lot of things. It's like you should be glad that a lot of people don't have to deal with the same crap that you had to deal with. That more people are passionate about something that you are passionate about. That's freaking awesome. And with that, I bring this video to a close. Anime is awesome. I've talked about it several times on this channel. I will talk about it several more times in the future, and it has impacted my life and just opened up a lot of worlds to me, and that's really awesome. I'll see you in the next one.